Awesome. And I get a volunteer to read the essential question. Go ahead.
How are powers distributed by the state and between the state and the national government in the federal system? What are some advantages and disadvantages of this system?
Awesome. Okay, so today we're going to continue talking about how power is distributed. Okay? So before we went to lunch, we did an opening routine, discussing how power can be distributed between the local, the state, and the federal levels of government. Today, will you please put the phone away? Today, we are going to continue analyzing that with a couple of activities and a couple of readings. And we're also going to see how this looks in the modern day. Okay, with the modern day example. We should all be done copying this down. Who still needs 10 more seconds? All right, let's go ahead. If you guys, excuse me? Yes, the essential question as well. If you guys did not finish writing this down, two things. One, remember, when we come back from lunch, it is important that you come on time. Because once we come in that room, I start the timer. Two, if you didn't finish it, I'm gonna have to switch the slide, but I have it written up here. Okay? So just make sure you have that down. Copy it down from the other side. Okay. So now we're gonna read a short text talking about the state powers and the federal powers of government. Okay? But before we read it, we always set a purpose. So we're going to be reading two different selections. The first one is going to be state power got a reservation. So these are our focuses. I want us to focus on what is a delegated power? What is a reserve power? What are some examples of concurrent or shared powers? What is a method the federal government uses to limit state power? So this is what I want you guys to have in the back of your heads when we're reading. We'll talk about this before we get to that, all right? So everybody go ahead and take your packet from the beginning of the class and turn over the opening routine. Let's move on to state power got a reservation. Everybody, let me see that we're on it. State power got a reservation. Let's see. Is everyone on it? What's up? City, neighborhood, it includes everything. City and neighborhood. It's like mayor, city council, things like that. All right, I'm going to put your book right behind the chair. Put your book right behind the chair. Let me see. Good, good. Come on, we're here. Okay. All right, so we're going to read like we always read. Wherever I stop. All right, I know some of you are still trying to copy down the objective, but let's pause that for now. I want us all looking at the reading answer. 100%. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to read this together. Wherever I stop, I want you guys to pick up. Okay? State power got a reservation. States have power. If you've ever been to a wedding, you probably heard the officiant wrap things up by saying, by the power vested in me by the state of Florida, I now pronounce the person performing the wedding got the power to perform weddings from the state. But where did the state get the power to give that power? Little countries. If you look up state in the dictionary, one of the definitions will sound a lot like the definition for country. Good. That's because state is another word for country or nation. A state is a political unit that has the authority to govern itself. The United States is a group of states that decided to unite themselves. Let's all pay attention. That decided to unite themselves under a single government. When states do that, they are not considered countries. And yet, they have their own governments. And they have their own power. The Constitution treats states partly as if they were independent countries and partly as small units within one big country. It lets states have power to do a lot of things, but it gives some powers only to the federal government. Good. Hey, that's reserved. Can I get a volunteer to read that first paragraph? Someone that I haven't heard from today. Dana, go ahead.
The Constitution gives a specific list of powers to the federal government. But even if you read the entire Constitution, you won't find a list of powers per state. Instead, the Constitution says this.
The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Delegated means assigned or given. Everybody go ahead and say that. Delegated.
Delegated.
Delegated means assigned or given. Reserved means set aside for. Everybody say that. Reserved.
Reserved.
So we have delegated powers and we have reserved powers. So under the Constitution, if a power is not specifically given to the federal government, it is a power set aside for the states. Unless the Constitution says it's something states aren't allowed to do. There are no reserved powers for the federal government. It only has the powers the Constitution says it has. That's no fun. So what can states do? You might want a cool title like Sir Brandon or Princess Caitlin, but you won't be getting one from your state government. It's not allowed. Granting titles of nobility is one of many things the Constitution says states can do. It's also something the federal government can do. Other no-nos include things that would interfere with the federal government's ability to exercise its own
Power.
to exercise its own
Power.
These are things that like making
Treaties.
with no other countries or starting a war. The Constitution also says no to states causing problems for other states. For example, a state can charge taxes on goods brought in from other states. So let's pause right there. We've learned a lot about state power and federal powers just in this one page, okay? So we learned that states and the federal government have powers, okay? Some of them are individually assigned for each, some of them are shared, okay? States have delegated and reserved powers. So basically, I'm about to pass out a sheet that you guys can look at. Basically, in the Constitution, it only states what the federal government can do, okay? It does not state what the states can do. This does not express that. So we have to assume that whatever is not listed in the Constitution for the federal government is reserved for the state governments. For example, nowhere in the Constitution do they talk about driver's licenses. Do they talk about what to do when you get into a car accident, or what to do with the speed limit, okay? Nowhere does it talk about that. However, we have to assume that if it's not specifically given to the federal government, then the state government has to take on that role. The Constitution does, however, state what the state government cannot do, okay? So it only mentions what it cannot do, but it can't mention what it can do. So we're going to talk about this with a little activity in a couple of minutes, but right now I want you guys to flip the page over. Flip the page over to the second part of the reading. And let me get a volunteer to read that loud and clear. Listen, loud and clear. We are where it says, go for it. Okay?
Go for it. So what powers have the green light for states? Have the green lights for states? That's like saying you can't have pizza, tacos, or mac and cheese for dinner. Now go list everything you can have. There are lots of powers the Constitution doesn't say anything about at all. There's nothing about education, healthcare, fire protection, police, and marriage, driver's licenses, how many dogs you can have, what happens to your stuff when you die, or whether skateboards are allowed at the park. State and local governments have the power to make rules about all and much, much more. They exercise this power by adopting constitutions of their own and by passing their own laws.
Alright, so basically an extension of what we were talking about in a little while ago, okay? So there's nothing in the Constitution about education, healthcare, fire protection, police, marriage, driver's licenses, how many dogs you can have, what happens to yourself when you die. These are all things that just because they weren't mentioned in the Constitution, someone has to deal with them. And that's where it becomes the states. What do you think?
If that's a new Promethean board.
If I'm good with the Promethean?
He said, is that a new one? And he said yes. He answered his own question.
Okay. So let's keep reading. Latavia, loudly.
Share and share alike. What if the Constitution states the federalist government can do something but doesn't say states can't do it? For example, the Constitution gives the federal government the right to collect taxes, but it doesn't say states can't collect taxes. Does that mean they can both collect taxes? In this case, yes. One collecting taxes doesn't stop the other from collecting taxes.
Okay. So you just read this. What does that mean? What does that paragraph say? In your own words.
What paragraph?
The paragraph that you just read, or anyone. What does that paragraph say? Yeah.
That if I have to, if I took like 2 sheets of paper, but she only had one, the person only had one, and they need 2, so the person will go get another sheet to make it equal, and we all both have 2 sheets of paper.
Okay. Okay, let's see, yeah.
It's they're basically saying that when there's something wrong with the Constitution or anything like that, the government will speak up and say that there might be something wrong with it because they know they can say something about it, but people don't know that they can.
Let's read that next paragraph and see if it can clarify a little bit what they're trying to say. Go ahead.
Shared powers are called concurrent powers.
Concurrent. Everybody say that.
Concurrent.
Concurrent. Everybody say that.
Concurrent.
Concurrent. Thank you. Go ahead.
Concurrent powers. Concurrent means at the same time. States can't share powers the Constitution gives them to the federal government. And this share the power will cause a conflict when the power can be shared. All other concurrent powers include running the court system, enforcing law, and borrowing money. Even the local government.
Okay, you can pause right there real quick. Alright, so basically, what's your question, Brian?
The question is, in the preamble, it talks about your proper welfare,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Is that part of healthcare?
Yes.
So why does it say, in the Constitution, it doesn't say nothing about healthcare?
So that's an implied power. So we're gonna talk about that with our next reading, okay? But I like that you mentioned that because it's gonna help us a lot when we're doing the Venn diagram activity today. Keep that in mind, but we're gonna get back to that. So table number 2. Table number 2. So basically this section right here is saying, you know, some things are not that clear cut. Some things are mentioned as a federal government power, but they're also a state power. These powers are called concurrent. So when you look at that word concurrent, think of the word, what root word do you guys see in concurrent? Current, okay? So a current in a river. So think current, okay? Going both ways. So concurrent powers are powers that are shared between the state governments and the federal government. An example, taxes. Both state governments and the federal government can impose taxes. Okay? So speaking of local governments, the Constitution says nothing about counties, cities, towns, boroughs, or any other small unit of government. It's up to states to decide what kinds of smaller governments to create and what powers those local governments will have. States rely on local government to deliver certain kinds of